Squad is a very hard and unforgiving game to play. My goal is to help you improve. Disclaimer, this guide is not new player focused and more directed towards people who have a very firm grasp of the mechanics of the game and have a few hundred hours under their belt. But that doesn't mean if you are new, you can't learn from it. But with that being said, welcome to my Advanced Infantry Guide in Squad. This is not a guide to help you become the best milsim player on Squad. This guide is intended to show you the best way to play infantry from a video game perspective and not a real life tactical perspective. I've been playing Squad since 2015, and these are concepts that I've learned over the years of thousands of hours I've spent playing this game on normal servers and also playing this game in the competitive scene. I'm going to cover many different topics in this guide, from overarching theoretical concepts down to nitty-gritty things like improving your aim, individual positioning, and even how to die. My goal is to help you guys put up numbers like these, so lock in, because it's going to be a long one with tons of information to excel your gameplay in normal pub games or even on the competitive side of Squad. So here I have a scenario set up on Quora just to explain a few theoretical concepts. The first concept I want to explain is how a typical firefight develops in Squad. And if you start thinking about Squad as in spawn points to spawn points and not necessarily points, like capture points to capture points, it'll help you visualize this as well. So if we have blue 4 here on the west and op 4 on the east, marked as blue and red respectively, and this is just called a lane. So in this entire area is one lane, and you'll hear me reference this in the video. And just so you guys know what I'm saying, it is simply a point where squads are fighting and people are pushing. So why it is important to understand this is because if you have these two squads and say they are excellent players and they are all really, really good, amazing shooters and do not make any mistakes, how this is going to flow out is these guys are going to push each other and get into engagements. And let's say that blue 4 kills 2 people on the north. And so what's going to happen is these guys on blue 4 are going to start pushing up and they are going to crossfire down into these people kind of playing in the center, the 2 red 4 playing in the center. And so what happens here is after those 2 red 4 guys die, these guys have to spread out a little more and start playing this lane better to fill the holes so no infantry can move through. And that also creates more weak spots on the south. And say now down here on the south, these 2 guys get wiped and are put on spawn timers and are respawning. These guys are now playing a 2v6 and it becomes almost impossible to hold this. And say blue 4 is wiping them completely and keeps encircling them and pushing them. As blue 4 gets closer and closer to the spawn point, it's going to be harder and harder for them to push because they're pushing into a spawn point and these guys have less room to move off of the hab, and so it's less time to engage the enemy. And say for example, if red 4 here was to kill 2 guys and send them back to their spawn point, and is now a 6v4 inside of red 4, there's going to be a lot more time to where these 2 blue 4 guys can rejoin into the fight. And so it'll give a lot more time for these red 4 guys to stabilize. And so it's going to be this kind of push and pull type of deal. And that's typically how a normal squad firefight develops. And I promise you, look for it in the next time that you're doing a kind of a hab with 1 or 2 squads with you. Another concept I want to talk about is called crossfiring. And it's a very simple concept, but I feel like I need to mention it. And it is simply just crossfiring over the lane. So if you are one of this blue 4 guy right here playing down in the south of your lane, you do not just want to be looking straight where you know the enemies are going to be coming from. You also want to be looking down to try and help your teammates. So say that this blue 4 guy up here dies, one of your teammates, and you kind of have to move to start covering these holes. You're going to want to be trying to look down here as well and across the entire lane, and don't just tunnel vision straight down to where you know the enemies are going to be pushing you from, just so you can help your guys out. And if you're able to crossfire and kill a red 4 guy up to the north here, that again neutralizes your lane, it is neutral, and helps your other guys up north. So something else I want to point out here is what enemies tend to do after they spawn. And think about it yourself. What do you tend to do after you respawn in Squad? And the initial reaction, because I know I do this myself even in pubs sometimes, is I run straight to where I think the enemy is going to be. So if you take a look at this scenario again, I have it simplified to 2 rally points for each side. So if blue squad If they're going to spawn, they're going to run directly towards checkpoint because they think that's where enemies are going to be. Same thing with green, same thing with yellow, same thing with red. Now I want you to take note of where these rally points are set, right? And just based off of those rally points, I'm going to give you guys about 5 seconds. Think to yourself, what do you think is going to happen in this scenario based off of the lanes and how this engagement is going to play out? So if you take into what I just said about how enemies are going to run straight to the point, and let's draw some arrows here to make this a little bit simpler. So blue squad runs like this, green squad runs like this, red squad runs in, and yellow does the same. What do you notice about blue 4? And the first thing is that they are running in at more of an angle than op 4 is. So what this is going to cause is a weakness down the center for blue 4 because of how far the rallies for blue 4 are spread apart from each other. And whenever the respawn happens, these green guys are going to run back into the fight. Blue guys will run back into the fight. When everybody starts running back into the fight, they're running directly to where they think enemies are going to be. And op 4 thinks enemies are going to be on hit farm, which they should be. And blue 4 thinks enemies are going to be on checkpoint, which they should be. And so what you'll see is green squad is going to start running in, and yellow squad is running this way. Same thing, red squad's running this way, and green squad is starting to move in more kind of a flank. So as people start dying and resetting, this middle starts to kind of fold open here. And op 4 is able to start to weasel their way into this center. And what eventually will happen as these guys will be able to push through, and it's going just to be a complete center lane crumble, and they're going to be able to get in and start farming the blue 4 from inside the point. And eventually blue 4 will lose this point here because op 4 is allowed to play as 2 congruent squads here together, and blue 4 is playing as solo squads trying to face against 2 squads. Because of how far away blue 4's rallies are and the way people typically move in squad after they respawn. So the takeaway here is if you are on blue 4, make sure that whenever you are running back when you're respawning, check your maps and say, where is there a possible gap? Where is there a possible hole? And think about to yourself, where are people going to run whenever they respawn? And if you were to simply have that thought in your head, and instead of running straight to checkpoint, and you see that this squad has a gap down the center, and you respawn, instead of just doing this, maybe you run a little bit north and try and fill some holes there. And so that way you have more map coverage and better map control. Try and see if you can recognize some of these big macro concepts of lanes and where the enemy is coming from when you are in game. The quicker you can recognize and understand these concepts, the quicker you can position yourself to take out enemies. Understanding these concepts will also help you out in the later parts of this guide when we deep dive into individual positioning. I'm going to show an in-game example of a squad not playing a very obvious lane, and instead of prioritizing map control, they mindlessly run to where they think enemies are going to be. I apologize because it might be a little hard to follow, but take a look. In-game example here of specifically squad 2. I want you to take notice of squad 2 in the center to the south of town hall here. Look where their rally is at. Their rally is on point, but look what they're currently doing. They're pushing directly to the attack point of where they think the enemies are going to come from. Now right here, their rally burns, their squad leader notices it, and he runs back to the point. Most likely where they're going to have come from is that southwest area, because what rally burned first? It was squad 2's rally and not squad 8's rally more on the eastern side. So if squad 2 would have just moved more southwest, they probably would have gotten more action quicker and played that open gap and area that they created, and they would have been able to prevent enemies from getting onto the point quicker. And as you notice, the point starts flashing, we start losing the point, and squad 2 now has to reset off of the hab to the north and push their way back into the point when they could have been fighting enemies to the south in that super predictable lane that the enemies are going to push up from. This is the end of part 1 of this infantry guide. This video is to nail down the bigger picture of infantry play, or macro gameplay as you'll sometimes hear it called. If you want to get more in-depth, more specific infantry play, please continue on to part 2. Each part will get more and more granular when it comes to infantry play, but understanding these macro concepts is just as important, if not more important, than your overall shooting skills, because how are you going to kill people if you don't know where to position yourself? I know a lot of this stuff can be boring, but it is super important you understand it, at least on a basic level, if you want to improve your game. Thanks for watching. Please check out part 2.